Vancouver. On the surface, it's as close to perfection as a city gets. A stunning place, set between mountains and the sea, it attracts immigrants from all over the world. Among them is Pam Zhao. Her affluent Chinese parents sent her here to study when she was just 12. Were you aware at that age that your family was very wealthy?
Not really, because what I thought is because I knew I had more allowance than others. But I remember I had my first Chanel wallet when I was like grade 9 or 10, but then I didn't know that was a Chanel. I don't see my family as like super loaded or like super rich. I think we're just at the point where we're satisfied.
Hello. Here we go.
Pam's family came here under Canada's Immigrant Investor Program, which welcomed foreigners with a net worth of at least $1.6 million. And she's far from alone. In fact, there are so many Chinese millionaires and their children in Vancouver that the phenomenon has spawned an online reality show. And Pam is one of the stars.
我是 Pam， 今年25岁，在温哥华经营一间模特经纪公司，叫做 Plan Management。
The show is called Ultra-Rich Asian Girls, and it documents the lives and shopping habits of some of Vancouver's wealthiest residents.
4万差不多。有比这个好一点的吗？
The program's been viewed millions of times all over the world. One of its biggest online followings is in Australia.
It's Magic Alhambra, and it's white diamond contract. 151,000.
These conspicuous consumers are the public face of a controversial migration trend. Canada's Investor Visa program has seen more than 100,000 Chinese millionaire migrants move to Vancouver in the past 2 decades. I've come to see what changes these migrant millionaires bring when they move to a city that's no bigger than Brisbane.
I'm Kevin, I'm the producer and director for the show. Nice to meet you.
Today, the crew of ultra-rich Asian girls are on location for season 3 of the show.
Pam, you brought all the girls here. This is your idea, right? So let's say, oh, I'm so happy. What are we making today, Logan? And, tell us all about it.
It was Kevin Lee's idea to film the Vancouverites, known in Mandarin as Fu or Die.
The Fu or Die is the equivalent of trust fund kids, and that translates to the rich second generation, Fu or Die. We filmed down in Beverly Hills in LA a couple of weeks ago. And
the extravagance of the Fu or Die lifestyle is contentious, both inside and outside China. Perfect fodder for reality TV.
There's a huge range of responses from my show, anything from utter disgust to utter fascination. The disgusting part, of course, is the amount of money that's being thrown around. They're talking about this Hermes handbag that starts at $15,000, and you just can't have just one. You have to have a few, right? People in mainland China hate it. The news hates it. Everybody hates it there, but they love talking about it, and they'll continue to watch it so they can find something to hate about it. Let's roll again. 3, 2, and 1.
Everybody's paying?
Audiences may love to hate it, but the show's stars say they're building their own personal brands in their adopted homeland.
That's why we have so many mean comments is from the producer.
This is Chelsea Zhang. Her family became millionaires when China's newly privatized economy boomed in the late 90s.
Very nice people.
They decided to move to Canada because it's peaceful, everybody's acceptable, and it's loving. They want to move me into this environment.
Pam says when she first got to Vancouver, she found the Chinese population here foreign.
Back then, it was mainly, people from Hong Kong or people from Taiwan. So when I got here, I was kind of like the first ones of the mainlanders who actually got here. Everybody was still speaking Cantonese, and Mandarin wasn't so popular here at all.
In the years since, mainland China's new riches have been pouring offshore. $450 billion in personal wealth left the country last year, driven by anti-corruption crackdowns and fears for the economy.
Okay.
Some of that torrent of Chinese wealth is flowing into real estate here in Vancouver.
Can we go
back.
Yeah, walk around. Just
Sorry, I'm just gonna put my stuff here.
Pam's just bought a new house.
Yeah.
And today she's looking for a retail store to rent.
Can I open this?
She's setting up a flower design business with friends.
Do the workshop kind of over here.
There's no hard data on the impact of ultra-wealthy migrants on the property market here. But one thing is certain, just like in Australia, prices are up. Way up. The influx has triggered a massive construction boom across every inch of downtown. The scale of the change in Vancouver has left me a little stunned. When I was last here 17 years ago, this was a low-rise, sleepy town. Now it's a forest of high-rise towers. Out in the suburbs, the market is even hotter. And unofficial stats suggest that in some suburbs, 2/3 of buyers are ethnic Chinese.
It was originally built in 1930 and it's been renovated in phases over the years and updated. Nothing in the way of recent updates.
Eric Coolum is showing me around a house his real estate agency's selling. It's nice enough, but not as flash as its price tag.
As far as the value, listed for $2.88 million, and most likely will receive competing offers. My guess would be it'll sell for north of $3 million.
Eric tells me that on average, houses are selling in just 5 to 10 days. And the new owners will most likely tear it down or keep it empty as a wealth-preserving investment. A short drive away, I find this ageing 2-bedroom townhouse on the market for around $900,000.
So we'd have to talk sometime.
Potential buyer Alex says it's tough for locals to get into the market.
I have 3 kids that are renting, right? Right now my middle daughter is living with me, and my eldest daughter is married to a doctor, and she is a doctor herself, and they both can't afford to live in the west side of Vancouver, and that's where they'd like to live, so they're renting. You know, for the young people, they just can't live in Vancouver. They can't.
You know, it doesn't matter if you're a doctor or a lawyer or whatever.
Ian Young is an Australian-born journalist for the South China Morning Post, who's made Vancouver his home. And he's been shocked by what's happening here.
You're not going to be able to afford a $3 million house in this neighbourhood on an average household income of $85,000. Not if you're funding your purchases with domestic income, and I don't think that people are.
That disconnect between local incomes and house prices has made Vancouver the second most unaffordable city in the world for 4 of the past 5 years.
If we look at 2015, single-family homes here went up 40%. That's got to be world leading, you know, 40%.
But these rapid changes have sparked surprisingly little debate here. Canada's famously multicultural society has made a discussion involving race almost taboo.
Quite rightly, people are very cautious when you're talking about issues regarding race and immigration, but this isn't really an issue, I think, about race. This is an issue about wealth. You know, it doesn't really matter whether, you know, the buyers in Vancouver are Chinese or non-Chinese or immigrants or non-immigrants. What matters is whether or not they are earning domestically, and that's what fuels unaffordability.
The first Chinese immigrants arrived in Canada 160 years ago. They were hard-working labourers who lived in poverty.
You know, what we have here is some of the documentaries that I've done, which is about the early Chinese pioneers living in Barkerville and in Victoria, BC.
TV producer Kevin Lee's parents came from Hong Kong in the 70s. Before making ultra-rich Asian girls, Kevin's work often focused on the local Chinese heritage.
And so this is one of the earliest photos of Chinese in Victoria, BC. Chinese has been in Canada since the mid-1800s. So it plays huge into the fabric of Canadian society. Of course, the Chinese has built the railroads, and you know, they volunteered their time and their lives during the Second World War. The Chinese does play a huge part into Canadian society.
Vancouver's Chinese population may be on the up and up, but its Chinatown isn't. In fact, I find it's shrunk to a couple of blocks with few signs of life.
What's going on in terms of businesses here?
A lot of the old businesses have left Chinatown. This one closed up. It used to be a Chinese coffee house, but then now they closed up.
Danny Kwan is a second-generation Canadian of Cantonese descent. And he's been coming here to the Hon Sing Athletic Club since he was a young boy.
This black and white photo dates back to 1939, and it's the founding of our club by the Wong Society.
Danny teaches lion dancing, and there are also traditional martial arts classes here. But there are hardly any students. Danny says the Cultural Revolution in China means most young mainlanders he meets don't identify with the old traditions.
Many of these parents grew up during a time in China when practicing your own traditions and heritage was frowned upon by the communist government. So you could see this domino effect.
Despite being ethnically Chinese, Danny feels a cultural disconnect with the Millionaire migrants.
Chinese mainland immigrants today seem to only focus on, I guess, the trappings of wealth. They like to flaunt their newfound wealth through expensive cars, real estate, and that's not to say there's anything wrong with that. But when it comes to connecting with their own culture and heritage, I'd be surprised to find any, at least the ones who I've met, any who are in tune with their own culture.
我从来没有在 Chinatown 买过东西. I actually don't really go there, but now I'm trying since my producer always convinced me that Chinatown is evolved.
Pam, one of the stars of the reality show Ultra Rich Asian Girls, recently visited Vancouver's Chinatown for her first time in 13 years here.
I mean, it is vintage. Of course, keep it the way it is, but to us, it's like that's not even where we lived in. So like, even I see it, I'm like, oh, that looks like pretty old. Like I haven't really seen buildings like that before.
Are you disappointed that the new immigrants aren't engaging more with organizations like this?
I am a little bit disappointed because you try to reintroduce this to them, their culture, and they find it foreign, and they find it, if I could use the term, distasteful.
Ironically, the influx of millionaire mainlanders could end up being the death of Chinatown institutions like Hon Sing. Skyrocketing property prices are slowly making their land taxes unbearable.
We run totally only on donations from our members. When you have a property tax bill that's in the 5 figures, it's kind of hard to...
So is that putting a strain on things?
Not yet, but I foresee in the near future, if things don't give, yeah, it could be a deal breaker.
Chateau Latour, the Palmera, 1995.
95?
Yeah.
Perfect. Good choice.
Okay.
The stars of Ultra Rich Asian Girls say they're not bothered by criticisms of their lifestyle and wealth.
Resentment is already out there, but I'm not worried about it because I only need to deal with people that can see the truth or can see what's really going on.
Because season 1, a lot of people are judging, saying, oh yeah, you know, like these people are just like a waste of the society. They're just like, you know, wasting resources, and they're just like living based on what's given. But then that's actually not true.
Pam's defying the stereotype by becoming an entrepreneur in her own right.
Black and white.
Yeah, black and white.
And then maybe natural color.
Today she's picking out packaging for the business she's starting with family money. Their flower shop will pay local taxes once it turns a profit.
And it's 100% organic cotton.
Chelsea has also started a business, an online store for new mothers.
And those are really soft.
But while some of the Fu-er-dai generation are diving into Canada's economy, some say they're the exception among millionaire migrants.
The primary breadwinners who arrived under those schemes, we're talking multi-millionaires here, were only paying an average of $1,400 in income tax each year. You know, they were declaring less income than refugees in many cases. Yeah, and the government doesn't like sharing a lot of this information either, you know.
Journalist Ian Young has been closely following Canada's Immigrant Investment Visa program, which peaked in 2010.
There were 35,000 applications that year, and virtually all of them, basically they were all mainland Chinese millionaires who had just flocked to these schemes. So it was really just insane.
Ian's research has found that the businesses started by millionaire migrants employ on average a grand total of one person.
Pretty clearly the Immigrant Investor Program has just been abject failures in terms of fostering economic growth and in terms of fostering business growth and jobs.
While the Canadian government has never described it as a failure, the Federal Investor Visa program has now been shut down altogether. But in a uniquely Canadian quirk, Quebec is allowed to run its own migration policy. It allows thousands of millionaires to migrate each year, provided they make an $800,000 loan to the Quebec government. But once they're on Canadian soil, 90% of the millionaire migrants leave Quebec.
This house was just recently bought here. This is a new style here.
Kerry Starchuk believes the ongoing influx is not just failing the economy, it's destroying her community.
The prices go up by the day, so it's hard to keep up.
Kerry says at least 10 houses on her street are now empty, bought by millionaire migrants as investments.
You can see the lights go on and everything, but there's nobody there. Just sold for $1,900, and there's still nobody living in it. That one's empty too. Never ever seen anybody in that house. And it sat empty for 5 years, and it still sits empty.
Kerry's family have been here 4 generations. But now, she says, the sense of community has evaporated. And the fact that her own modest house has skyrocketed in value is no compensation.
I'm not happy my house is worth $1.5 million. I'm not happy at all because I got to pay more taxes. My kids are never going to be able to afford to live here, and we're losing our community. No, I'm not happy. Money has taken precedence over our neighborhoods. This one here is all the letters I've written to the different politicians. It's not good news.
Kerry's been channeling her frustration into activism. But the local mayor simply told her to take the money and move. And her Facebook group and media appearances haven't always been well received.
One lady picked my name up and called me white supremacist and a racist. And I was really, really hurt. I lived in a multicultural community here. My best friend's Chinese, my daughter-in-law's from Japan.
Some suspect the accusations of racism are a convenient cover for greed.
We've seen the development industry here very, very keen to push this notion that this is a form of yellow perilism. It's been quite striking that you've got this coterie of, wealthy white investors accusing people of being racists, because they're raising concerns about, the impact of millionaire migration, of selling passports.
The speed and intensity of the boom has left many searching for answers. Tonight, concerned locals are filing into a community meeting.
The typical Chinese investment portfolio is half real estate. So real estate is an important part of the story.
Professor David Lay has been studying immigration and housing market bubbles around the world. He believes that while Australia is facing similar forces, it's attempting policies to control the boom, while Canada isn't.
Melbourne yesterday doubled a tax from 3% to 7% on foreign buyers.
While the situation feels dire to the people here tonight, David is quick to remind me that these migrations are a regular feature of human history.
You go back one generation, it would be the US. You go back 100 years in Australia or in Canada, and it would be the UK. You know, it is just where we are today.
With their enormous wealth and provocative TV show, these reality stars could make for easy targets. Fate has made them the designer-clad vanguard of global forces beyond anyone's control. But it's a role they've decided to embrace.
I totally understand. It feels like there's a rush of water coming to the land. All of a sudden, you're not living in dry land anymore. You're living in the ocean. I totally understand that. But then, hey, time changes. Every world changes. Chinese brought you great food and better economy. What's there to complain about?
After generations of economic weakness, China is now flexing its financial muscles
2006.
and enjoying the good life like every empire and superpower before it. It's up to its neighbours around the world to figure out how to cope with the new guests at the party, and for the guests to figure out how they're going to fit in.
In Vancouver, I feel I'm fully at home. You know why? Because Vancouver is caught in between Chinese and Canadian, actually. And for myself, I'm caught in between Chinese and Canadian.
Avoiding becoming no more than a resort town stranded in the middle will be Vancouver's challenge for the years ahead.